further ado, can I call upon the Prime Minister to begin the debate? Thank you.
We think that Israel is about to take a massive step that is going to be massively harmful to the Palestinians living in the West Bank and in the Jordan Valley. And we think that probably Europe has the ability to put massive pressure on it to stop. There is a lot of trade going on between Israel and Europe. This is some of the most important economic allies geographically and in terms of the technology and military cooperation that Israel is in Europe. And we think that the EU can actually affect its behavior. We're going to talk about why annexation is such a terrible step that Israel is going to take. We're going to talk about, we think the resolution makes the annexation much less likely to happen. And then we're going to talk about why probably there can be achieved positive changes in this field. Right? So look, we think that the thing is that the annexation, first of all, on itself, the moment that it happens, is going to lead to a huge spike in violence in the region, right? From the Palestinian side, you no longer have the PLO cooperating with the IDF in order to suppress terror. And we think that even if the PLO, for some insane reason, decides that it does want to continue cooperating, it is going to lose all its power, and therefore nobody is going to listen to it when it's trying to have less terror. It's going to lose its ability to actually rule on the ground. We think that the people on the ground are massively angry about this step. They know that this is an attempt to take away any chance that they're ever going to have of having their own state and achieving their national goals. And we think that thus there's going to be a lot of terror from the Palestinian side. We think that on the Israeli settlement side, then we think that the settlements see this as an empowering step, see this as saying that they are correct in their struggle, that the land really is theirs, that now finally the Israeli government is recognizing that everything should be their own, and this empowers them to take even more violent steps towards the Palestinians who live within the Jordan Valley, to try to push them out, to try to make sure that few of them stay there, just because part of the celebration that they're going to have is probably going to be expressed in violence that is towards the Palestinians living in these territories, right? We also think that on the more long-term scale, it's very hard to undo an annexation once you've already taken this as part of the state and have all the Israeli institutions there, and you build there much, much more than you could now. And we think that the thing is that once you don't have the Jordan Valley under the control of the Palestinians, that means that you don't have one continuous territory where you could ever found a state. We think that this is massively important. It is very unlikely to be able to found a state where it's just a bunch of little islands made up of the 8 territories, but you don't have anything else. And we think that that means there is no real option for the Palestinians to ever have those states. We think that when we're talking about the continued occupation, obviously that is something that is harmful in terms of people having no freedom of movement, no economic freedoms, where they experience everyday violence and oppression. We think this is likely to even get worse for the Palestinians who are within the Jordan Valley, and now the settlers are massively afraid that they're going to have riots and things like that as part of the annexation. As a result, they're going to crack down on them even more and even harder. And we think that also importantly, once you separate the Palestinians living in the Jordan Valley from the rest of the West Bank, you're separating them from the, often you're separating them from their agricultural land, and right, these are farmers. If you separate them from their land, they don't really have any economic means. You're separating them from their families that they can no longer go and visit. You're separating them from the academic institutions they can learn in their own native language, and so on and so forth. We think this is massively right. Why do we think that this is less likely to happen on our side of that? Right? So we think that we need to understand that Netanyahu has people who vote for him for several reasons, right? Some of them really are very extreme right-wing people who think that we need to have Israel control the whole West Bank and all of these things. But many of them actually vote for the Likud party because they think that they've been doing a good job on economically in terms of making sure that there is growth, making sure that there is historically low unemployment, and all the things that they achieved on the economic level, right? We think it's very hard for him to keep selling himself at the point where people find that the economic situation is much worse than it used to be. And this is especially true when we already have a deficit that was going last year, and now you can see that there's a rising deficit due to the coronavirus pandemic and so on and so forth. We think that this is a time when the economy is becoming more fragile, right? And we think that if, in addition to this, we're going to lose the trade with Europe, which is, again, massively important because the European countries are the closest real allies that Israel has geographically. There's a lot of trade going on between the countries where, for example, Germany's car sector takes a lot of its technology from the technology being developed for the car sector within the high-tech industry. In Israel, you have a lot of these types of economic cooperation. We think that that means that you're going to have to raise taxes, GDP is likely to be lower, you're going to lose a lot of jobs, and we think that it is something that is going to make the voters much angrier and much less likely to support him in the future. Now, we need to see also that the government in Israel currently is a very unstable government, right? We think that Gantz, which is the main, right now, partner within this coalition, is not so hot on annexation. He didn't really support it until he felt that he had no other choice. He has a lot of actual left-wing voters, and we think that the thing is that the government is very fragile. If we give him a real option to sort of back out of this thing and not actually have to support it, we think he's very likely to do this, and this gives him the ability to do that. And also because, again, he's afraid of losing his voters, which are even more focused on the economic and social issues than they are on the political issues. This is the main ticket that these centrist parties have that they are going on. Right? So we think that means that we get annexation to be much less likely. Before we continue, CO. Yes.
People in Hebron are willing to die on a daily basis. Why do you think that the EU would change their mind?
We think you don't need to change the minds of the people in Hebron. We think you need to change the minds actually of the majority of the people, of the voters who are living within the green line, right? Because we think these are the people that are actually Netanyahu is afraid of, right? Netanyahu thinks that he cannot afford to even lose one election, right? It's not like I can lose one election and then come back the next election, because if he loses one election, he's going to be judged according to an actual trial, like trials are supposed to happen, and then end up in jail for the rest of his life, right? So we think that it is very important for him to make sure that all his voters are appeased, and we think that the main body of voters is going to be very, very upset by an economic downturn, much more than they're going to be by, okay, fine, we didn't annex now, but probably you can say, okay, we're building a bit more in some other settlements, we're doing some other things to appease you, and you will be fine, right? But we also think, look, we think that in the long, when we're talking about the long term, so we can see that the Democratic Party in the United States is becoming more and more left-wing and supports Israel less and less as the time goes on, as they have younger people who are more liberal and see the occupation as more problem. We see that within Europe, the BDS is getting much, much stronger. There is more support for applying pressure on Israel. We think that it is likely that Biden is going to be the next president other than Trump, but even if Trump has another term, it is likely eventually they're going to have Democratic Party. We think that as a result, if Israel does not annex now and keeps the option to actually have a peace process, it is likely we can push Israel into doing this in the future. We think that we are gaining more and more support from the international community to actually apply the pressure. And if we don't annex now, thus killing any option of building a continuous state in Palestine, it is likely we will be able to do this. For all these reasons, please oppose.
I'd like to thank the Speaker for that speech, and now I'd like to cross the floor and hear from the first speaker of the opposition side, please.
Okay, I'm starting in 3, 2, 1, start. Okay, Israeli GDP per capita is higher than pretty much every country in Europe because Israel are creating high-tech equipment which he can sell pretty much everywhere in the world, unless in the poor countries. We think that there are many countries that can afford Israel's high-tech, which are for big quality, which are like well connected with all other devices. We think that for these products you can find buyers. And I don't think that comparative for European Union is that big as opening the government speaks, because they have decent case, but this case doesn't have anything with reality, because this is actor motions, we should watch what is the best for European Union. I'm not sure they say 3 times European Union unless they say we can do this, this is going to be effective. Why we as European Union would give a fuck whether this is going to be effective or not? Not clear after their speech. Only one point of rebuttal about Netanyahu would be integrated in my speech. So they say this is going to be annexation and necessarily have violence. We think it is lunatic to say that they're going to just take whole West Bank to them. We think that in these sort of situations, some parts of the West Bank are already under control of the Israeli state and the Israeli government and Israeli military. Just is not then created as boundaries. No, that if you do this is much easier to sell to the Western parties. This is some like sticky propaganda. It's much easier for you to clear your name after that than just to invade another country. We think this is most likely to happen, just to take parts where they already have control. So into our speech. I would have 2 arguments in this speech. First one is why this is going to create more division in European Union, why this is much worse than any impact opening government is giving us, because all impact they are giving are on Palestinian life, not necessarily connected with European Union. And secondly, how this is going to shift Israeli politics into right, speaking about Netanyahu and that. So before that, what is right now happening in European Union? Now in European Union are happening a lot of things that are actually shifting the trust to European Union, to people, not necessarily to European Union. Meaning they are Eurosceptic, they want to go out of European Union, not necessarily go out of Europe or European Union, but this is the propaganda that is being sold by right-wing politicians, and they don't like migrants. So what happened? Brexit happened. right is on a rise in European Union countries like Poland, like Hungary. Third thing is that a lot of countries are shifting closer to China, like Italy, which is building ways, which China is building highway into their country. And fourth, and more important reason that happened is Corona. This trust in European Union after Corona is much greater in these sort of situations because governmental money is divided. European Union money is divided as a lot of countries didn't want to be. The one who went the best from Corona, they give the most money. The one who went worst, they don't think it's enough money that is given to them. And this trust in European Union is rising on both sides. Meaning that we are now risking pretty much everything because know that this thing is not something that is guilt of European Union, but this is something if European Union does this, that is going to be portrayed as like if new migrants come into European Union, this policy would be to blame on. Know that this doesn't need to make any sense in comparative that this is really that happened because of European Union the decision. But this is something as right-wing politicians would frame it, and this is something that it is going to be much easier to buy when you see the migrants which are coming without any job to do, meaning that they're much more likely to actually try to be criminals or whatever. So our argument. Firstly, this is going to create division in European Union because these trade agreements are created long time ago, and majority of cases these are bilateral agreements, meaning that probably Luxembourg doesn't have any agreement with Israel, but some other countries does. Not yet POI. What is this going to create? This is going to create a situation in European Union where some countries depend on Israeli much more and on Israeli economy, and their economy is relied on Israeli, and the others are not. This is pretty much the same like Russia, where Germany and Austria are having the hardest time, and some countries doesn't even feel it, that sanctions to Russia. Know that this is going to create in these countries much greater chance for Euroscepticism to actually rise. This is something that is extremely bad for European Union because their main goal is to sustain European Union. This is only, as we see, this is only symbolic act and symbolic message that they can say that they're not dependent on United States. But what can happen? It can happen that EPP is rising much more, and they're going to create much worse politics for European Union, much greater comparative than actually opening governments are speaking about. Secondly, these countries are now going to have like more expensive and lower quality equipment to give, because you're taking from them the one who they decided it's the best to fit for them for the price and for the quality. Now when you take that, they need to find a new one, which is probably not going to give them that good conditions as they have with some country that they traded 20 years, because they know that this is now something that they need to find, because now they don't have anything to sell from anywhere to buy, and they need this high-tech equipment, meaning that this is going to be spun as guilt of European Union's decision, and it is much likely to actually push people to not vote for European Union, to vote for Brexit and stuff like that. What is going to happen with Israel, Netanyahu and stuff like that? Before I continue, I'll take closing if you have anything. Know that if this is correct, then probably countries in Europe would rather buy their products from France. I'm not sure what is correct about this, but I'm certain that it's correct that if I can buy from France more quality and cheaper production of guns, I would probably buy. I wouldn't go to some Asia country. This is like closeness. This is your ally from your union. You're probably more likely to buy it, but you don't buy it. You have some reason. So about Israel and politicians. Netanyahu, this is going to happen as happened in Serbia 15, 20 years ago, as happened in Iraq with Desert Storm 1991, when some sanctions are happened. These strongmen are the ones who are going to spin it as something that is to blame on West. Meaning that when I was in Serbia, nobody blamed Slobodan Milosevic for NATO bombing, for sanctions that happened in Yugoslavia. Everybody blamed the West, because this is something that this is telling you by somebody who has the most approach to the internet, to the television, and he is telling you that this is something that they are to blame and we need to defend from that. This is going to shift guns politics into right, because he now needs to defend that, because people think that this is correct, and you're going to lose every decent center in the Israeli, meaning that less stable Israeli, meaning less peaceful Middle East, meaning more migrants and riots and instability in European Union. Proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the speaker for that speech, and I'd like to cross the floor and hear from the second speaker of the opening government side, please.
The notion that we should stand by and allow a terrible action to happen and be supported by a massive trade partner of ours, or at least to them, massive trade partner. The notion that we should allow millions of people's lives to be ruined and for any hope of an end to the Middle Eastern conflict to happen at all, for all of that, just because some countries might be a little upset about this, is insane. We think that there's a massive legitimacy issue here that needs to be engaged with, that was engaged with up until now, and we continue to talk about in terms of why, even if we don't succeed at stopping this, which we think is likely for all the reasons that Neta explained, we just have the moral need and legitimacy to take our obligation to take this action. But before that, let's talk about, I want to say 3 points of rebuttal. Sure. First of all, to this response on the notion of Euroscepticism and the fact that it's going to increase it. So several responses. One, notice this is a binding resolution. It requires all the countries to have bought in to begin with. The motion assumes that this is a thing that is happening. Secondly, notice even if we put that aside, secondly, we think that there are so many more important things that are internally strife inside these European countries, trade agreements that they do or don't want to strike, the question of free speech inside the countries, trying to push them into yes or not having an abortion and free elections and things like that. We don't understand why this is going to be a massive issue that is what is going to in any way make the difference to the way that these countries engage with Europe, but why they care that much. Thirdly, and one of the reasons that they don't care that much, sure, Israel is their best trading partner of these tech, but it's not like there are not other countries that sell technology, like the United States, for example, or any other internal European countries. We think that there's plenty of other places where they can get, and it's not that optimal position, but the extent to which this is what the countries are going to care about, really small. Fourthly, the countries that tend to trade with Israel on these kinds of technologies or things like that tend to be the stronger countries that have the money to, such as Germany or France, or countries that currently support this resolution. So we don't think the Eurosceptic countries are necessarily going to care that much or going to be interested. But lastly, we tell you that insofar as we've explained why this annexation is unlikely to happen in the first place, the second we put this through, there's no reason why this is going to piss off or upset any of these small countries who are going to be upset about it, because their trade won't be harmed, because Israel won't go through with it, and then none of these problems happen. Cool. Let's engage. Let's then get into talking secondly about this question of why it is that we really don't think this is going to happen, because Neta gives you a ton of explanations about the internal strife inside Israeli politics, why Gantz ran on an anti-Bibi ticket, is seen as a centrist and was voted for by many left-wing people who currently still support him, why it is that there's a lot of questions and that he's been hemming and hawing about taking this step to begin with, why it is that he's constantly been reserved about annexation, why he said that we need to wait for the Americans to fully agree, and are they or aren't they, and whether or not it's the right time, and exactly whether it's going to be unilateral. All of these things are statements that Gantz has already made, and for a reason that his voters care about this, both in terms of the economy and in terms of many of them being left-wing themselves and actually thinking this is a terrible move on a number of moral and practical levels, right? And we say, when we give him this tool to say, look, there's a very strong, even if we think that annexation might be positive for us, the extent to which this is going to massively harm our economy, it is not worth it, and that is the reason why we are willing to take this out. We give him a much more legitimacy to do this. What have they said to us to respond to this? And that is why we think this is unlikely to happen. One, they said, well, it's not going to harm their economy that much. How big of a trade partner is Europe? What? There are other countries that you can sell tech to. No, there are a limited number of rich countries that buy at the level and at the price that Israel can currently sell to these countries. We think that obviously the United States is one of its biggest trade partners, and that's a separate issue. But Europe is trade with Europe is a massive percentage of its GDP because of its geographic proximity and ability to get that, because of the level of trade that you can do with those countries. We think that just to say, they can sell it somewhere else is hand-waving the extent to which this is genuinely going to be harmful to the economy, and therefore plays into all of Neta's analysis. But second of all, they try and tell us, no, the second the EU applied pressure, suddenly Gantz is going to have to move to the right, because no one likes it when people apply pressure from the outside. We think that, given that this is something that a lot of the people, as Neta explained, who voted for Gantz in the first place and who are members of his party, agree with anyway, the way in which this is going to be framed is taking a step that they think is probably a positive one, and this tips the scale. We think that framing in terms of who these people are and where their likely buy-in is critically important to the way in which they're going to respond to this move. This is also why it's important to notice when the United States said, we're not so sure we're going to let you do this, and in fact have not been very clear that they are actually going to let Israel do this at this point, it has not been the case that everyone's been like, no, now we have to do it. They've said, this is a very important trade partner. Maybe we should wait. Maybe that we should engage with what they actually want from us because they're important to us, etc. This is the process that's been happening up until now. So we just think that in that sense, we're saying that it's not happening in the first place. Then, okay, let's talk about the moral that means that all of our case in terms of why we're stopping this harm, why it is that all these terrible things that can occur in terms of the violence, in terms of the the Palestinian people, etc., we're actually probably managing to stop them. And we think that is a massive benefit on our side. Before I continue, I will take closing.
So this doesn't happen without a 2-day EU summit, where literally countries are going to fight each other's necks in order to get the consensus that they need. This cannot be preemptive, that they're going to fight and then tell Israel, oh, you cannot annex.
What the motion says, they're going to pass the binding resolution. Maybe there's going to be fights before. The end result is that they're passing the binding resolution. That is the motion. Those are the words. Okay, cool. So that's fine that they're going to fight about it. Excellent. Let's talk about moral legitimacy here, because even if we don't think that we're stopping this from happening, these terrible atrocities that the Israelis want to perpetrate, we think that if they go through with this horrible plan, it is our moral obligation to not continue to give them money and not continue to trade them. Why do we think this is so? We think, in the first place, because Europe is a massive trade partner with Israel and gives them a significant percentage of their GDP. What this means is that we are continuing to support and actively allow them to engage in this conflict and actively allow them to oppress the people. When they take our money and they take the things that we've given them and the trade that we have with them, and they use that to fortify themselves and to allow them to buy more arms, to continue to be able to allow themselves to take more risk because they have better security and better intelligence because they poured money into that, etc. That is the point at which they are more able to commit the atrocities that we are continuing to support. We think that insofar as they've gone through with this, we have to take a stand and we have to stop them. But more than that, we tell you, we just think that it is illegitimate for us to continue to gain from a people and from a country that is going to be using its illegal land, etc., to be able to further its economy, to be able to get all the things that we're trading with them, etc. But thirdly, we tell you the extent to which this is a harm to the potential for peace in the Middle East is massive. Neta explains to you that the likelihood here is that once we've taken this step and we've emboldened Israel to take further steps in terms of not stopping them here, what this means is that our ability to roll back the dice and be able to have literally a strip of land on which a country can be founded gets massively, massively reduced. What that means is that insofar as we don't take the step and we don't take a massive signal to attempt to push forward the rest of the liberal states to come with us and to join us in going against this atrocious act that Israel is going to take, that is the point at which we are morally complicit in a terrible act happening. For all those reasons, please propose.
I'd like to thank the speaker for that speech, and now I'd like to cross the floor and hear from the second speaker of the opposition side, please.
Panel opening hour says that there is a moral need for EU to act upon. Notice one thing, this is about real politics, about what is going to actually happen in the field and what is going to do. So notice one thing, most of the EU, bulk of the countries, do not recognize Palestine, but all of them recognize Israel as a sovereign state. And third of all, actually, they were silent enabler of status quo all of these years. They saw this as a moral thing to do, to put those Israeli settlements, never threatened it, and everything like that. So they will be hypocrites if they do it right now. But more on that, they're saying, notice one thing, they never proved to us why EU has moral obligations specifically towards Palestinians to enact upon that. We say to you even more, there is a moral obligation towards EU citizens that is larger than those towards Palestinians. Why so? First of all, the obvious reason is there is more people who are living in the EU than in the Palestine itself. And after all, people are paying some kind of taxes, so they're getting in the EU budgets and used by them and everything like that. And second of all, let's weigh up marginal benefits that are existing with EU acts and if it doesn't, if acts. Look, notice one, what will this happen if EU acts? It will harm stability of EU because of numerous reasons that Srdjan told you. Because we are having rising skepticism, you're having migrant crisis, you're having surge of right-wingers in Europe, in most of the Central Europe, and having them as strongmen who are posing as figures who are propping Christian right-wing values and everything like that. And it is easy to pinpoint, like, you have betrayed someone who has been your ally for like last 70 years and everything like that. Other than that, you're simply losing money in these trade deals, because as Srdjan explained to you, we have seen so many instances where these trade deals are long in motion. They are the best and optimal way which people use those agreements, like they buy those specific technology and everything like that. And that would significantly harm those people who are dependent on those things. And notice one thing, economy will suffer specifically because of Corona, because in COVID-19, you need to, if you have these things imposed right now, you have to negotiate new trade agreements that would, and they need a long term to be actually imposed, to make a deal with other countries and everything like that. So people who are usually buying this will suffer right now. And CG has the right that when says, oh, France will step in, but France will step in with, I don't know, maybe a similar quality of product, but much higher price. And people will feel betrayed because they will feel like this is something that is imposed upon by them, like people of Hungary believing that it would be better for them to buy Merkava tanks from Israel than buying some shitty French tank, but they have no option to do so right now. So it further undermines stability of EU. And now let's look at what are the marginal benefits for this region, because we say to you, EU has incentive for this region to be stable. People in this region, Palestinians especially, will be harmed by Israel regardless if this is acted upon, because there will be skirmishes and everything like that. And this will only fortify Netanyahu and those people in power, because as Srdjan explained to you, most of the sanctions, either economic like they were in 1993 in Yugoslavia, or they were war one like with Saddam Hussein, they never were truly something that broke people, that said, oh, Netanyahu is doing something terrible. They were always saying, like, this is some external factor which is trying to fuck us up, to leave us from Holy Land and everything like that. We're having the similar situation with Kosovo in 99, with Serbia as well. So, and last of all about the principle. If we take their principle to the end of it, notice one thing, EU has obligation to each specific harmed and marginalized group, like Uyghurs in China, like Rohingya people, like you name it. There is always someone who is oppressed, and you have moral obligation to it. But you need to weigh in towards other people who are also your citizens, and you have a larger obligation towards them. Now let's talk about why EU needs stable region, and why this will long-termly fuck this over. Notice one thing, this will not be all-out war, because notice one thing, prolonged war does not benefit Netanyahu as well. It will take the borderline settlements near the West Bank, which are bordering Israel and everything like that. It will be easier to sell to their US allies via APAC and everything like that. And other than that, they say, oh, Likud is good with the economy, and now they will lose it. Now people can be rallied upon these sanctions and everything like that. Because notice one thing, if this is something that is going to be done like in, I don't know, next 6 months or a year, this would Benny Gantz would be complicit with this, because he would be the one who is participating in this government. Therefore, he would tie himself directly to Netanyahu, and we would see the shift in Israeli politics. Why so? Because people who voted Gantz, who were hoping for toppling Netanyahu and having more centrist government, were betrayed after 3 elections and constantly voting. People are tired of this shit, so they will you'll lose that. And other than that, people will perceive you as complacent with everything that Netanyahu did. So basically, you're going to lose people on Benny Gantz, and more people will be gained by Likud. How so? Because they're going to take votes from right-wing parties, like party of Avigdor Lieberman or anything like that. They will use those people in order to gather more support for those people. Therefore, when you have so much right-wing government, which only position is to stay in power because all of the corruption charges and everything like that, it would be even more extreme, and they would even more point fingers to European Union, to like they were one to blame. So therefore, you would have the guns would be tied up with Netanyahu, and otherwise you have hung parliament, which also leads to instability to this region. Therefore, you're having no good position if you impose these sanctions. Because when you impose these sanctions, it leads to atrocities, it leads to hardening the stances, and you're not having either the benefits that you wanted for the Palestinians, neither you're having anything good for the EU. You will lose money, you'll have protracted bad economy status because of the coronavirus and everything that comes with that. You'll have more division inside the EU because they're going to see like you're taking money from those people who are usually buying cheaper but greater Israeli technology and everything like that. So you're basically getting war and skirmishes and more extreme politics in the end. And you're not getting anything in return as the EU. Because all of these reasons, incredibly proud to oppose.
Across the floor and hear from the first speaker of the closing opposition side, please.
I'm going to explain why internally this is going to be worse for EU citizens because of the way this decision is going to be made within the EU and what kind of compromises countries would have to do in order to get to this. Then I'm going to explain why we don't think that this method is going to be very effective and there are other measures. And then if it isn't effective, why we think that eventually it's going to harm disproportionately the Palestinians and Israelis that are innocent. So let's start with a quick extraneous rebuttal though to the case we heard, which was a bit of a weird case, because notice that this entire protector of international rights relies on the fact that the EU is going to be very successful in doing that and is not going to lose out by having an annexation. But then by knifing their opening government, it seems weird because they say Netanyahu is going to do whatever he wants anyway. So then how is the EU going to be seen as a strong person really enforcing its values if it doesn't succeed in doing that? That's really strange. Second thing, they can still have diplomacy. They can still even condemn Israel if it does something. You don't necessarily need to have economic sanctions in order to be seen by the world as someone who supports the Muslim agenda. Thirdly, we say that for that there are other types of conflicts that they can intervene in. So we heard Mali from the other side. We think that Russia is a thing. We think that Iran is a thing. We don't understand why you specifically need only the Middle East, and that if you lose out and don't do enough on the Middle East because you can still have diplomacy, what kind of outrage are you going to see? Really, what kind of effect is there going to be? Will the world say, the EU are not leftists anymore? I mean, seriously, that's ridiculous. Let's move on then to the part about the EU, because we think that there are countries, as we heard, within the EU that are greater supporters of Israel and of Netanyahu, specifically Hungary, Poland, and so on. Now, we do get that there is a fiat to government, and there is going to be a binding resolution, but notice that in order to pass that, countries like Germany or France, or those that want to do it, would necessarily have to give something to the other countries because they need a consensus vote in order to pass this kind of policy. This means that they would have to necessarily trade in for other things that Hungary finds really important. We think that at the best case scenario, it's going to be in terms of economical help with the coronavirus, and it's going to give only more money to a dictatorial regime. But we think that there are other means of extorting the EU to the point where they would have to accept judge reform in Poland. Then they wouldn't have to insist on abortions in those countries. We think that those are the kind of moves that are even worse when it comes to human rights because they're in the EU's backyard and they would not do so much to handle that, which we think is already a massive problem. But then let's move on to talk about Israel. So notice that we get from opening government this characterization of, look, the Israeli public is going to base its decisions on the economy, stupid. But notice that the actual people that really support this annexation are a very small group within Israeli. So it's only religious Orthodox that are not even ultra that see this as a legitimate move. But why then, if most people don't support necessarily the annexation, people still support Netanyahu? It's not the economy. We say that he constantly bashes on his voters, which are live in the periphery, which he's taken away budgets from, and so on. But they like him because he has a cult of personality. He's seen as a strong man that is not, and that's important, that is not afraid of the left. And here notice that this means that his base is worried that the EU and other bodies are going to impose their need and are going to betray the country, and we're going to give away everything to the Arabs. That's a narrative that they have. Now, what does this mean? This means that the economical idea is not going to influence Netanyahu, because it's not people like myself or Neta or Miriam that even vote for him or that care so much about those things. And if they want to talk about opposition, in the last few weeks there have been daily demonstrations and nothing changes, right? We have the guy for 13 years, maybe going on for more. So we don't think that this is going to create a difference. But why do we think that still it's not a likely thing to happen, irrespectively, luckily, for the EU sanctions? Because notice that this is going to happen only if the United States support this. And the only American, according to opening government, who really supports annexation is Trump. Also, we think that this is only going to be done if it's able to distract the Israeli public from the fact that Netanyahu is standing on trial, and if Netanyahu is still on power, and he has only a year or so to remain there in office. This means that there is a very small window of opportunity for actual annexation, meaning that you need to have so many different circumstances in order for that to happen, and you don't need the EU sanctions especially, and it won't make a difference anyway. But what does it then do? It means that the debate is only relevant to the point where there is an annexation eventually in this year and so of a window. Now, what then happens? This means that A, you disproportionately harm Israelis that did not want this, that do not support this, and you harm their economy. Moreover, it's not as if Israel's budget is now decreased, it's going to go away from the settlements. No. It's going to take the money is going to go from taxes, which are paid by people like myself. But moreover, this is money that is going to be taken from support of the PLO, which is happening today. Before I explain to you what this means, I will take a POI from opening. No, closing. So we think that hopefully this will pass because there wouldn't be American support, and that's it. It would be shown as, okay, we can't do it because we won't have people supplying us with weapons and F-16s, which are the Americans. So we think it's still better. Then, so money is going right now in electricity, water, and services to the PLO from Israel, and they are landlocked. So Israel has to give all of the services and has to deliver goods for them. We think that if we have this kind of operation, this means that Israel is going to take away from them, and to do this is a sort of punishment for, okay, you ruined our economy. And we think that this eventually harms them even more. Moreover, we think that once the economy shrinks, it takes away from for Palestinians to work daily in Israeli construction, which they do in Israeli factories, because now the borders will be closed because the economy is shrinking, meaning that we have hurt Palestinians more, we have hurt Israelis more that are innocent for nothing, basically. So for all of those reasons, we're very proud to oppose.
For that speech, now I'd like to cross the floor and hear from the opposition whip speaker.
So I'm under the impression that the European Union has already tried solving territorial annexation disputes with economic sanctions before. I think it didn't work. I think it backfired, and it caused a beef in the Union and weakened the European Union. I think this will dictate the discussion as well here. I'm talking obviously about Crimea and what happened there. I think that Monica shows you why this will not de-escalate Israel, but make it double down and harm Palestinians more in this situation. I think that also, kind of like Israel has had the best US administration since the Cold War, and it will not be super pissed if this doesn't happen. Probably if Israel will still be super pissed that this doesn't happen, that means they will be even more pissed that the EU sanctioned them for this happening, which means that they only kind of like increase the escalation that this will lead in EU and Israel relations, and I think that's a bad thing, and they kind of like it backfired on them. So I want to respond to closing government directly, and then I want to talk about what matters actually for European Union in this debate. So first, on the idea that there's a dependent on the three Ds that closing government brings. So the idea that EU is dependent on international laws, I think that's literally bullshit. Like with the idea of, I don't know, Syria, Turkey, China, and all of the things that the European Union has, let's there with Uyghurs, with China taking like Southeast China Sea, with Turkey literally doing whatever it wants as long as it puts migrants there, with Turkey annexing a part of Syria, with like Syria being in a civil war for 10 years, the European Union did not do much there. And I think that when you selectively decide to defend international law, that's not looked upon as you are at least doing something, but rather it's not a uniform policy, and you are a hypocrite then when you act in like specific occasions and not having policy. But on the second hand, this is the debate on trade. I think that every time you impose economic sanctions, that deteriorates in the economic treaties you have with other countries and trade treaties, and you shoot yourself in the leg because you're shown as a country that's like wants to like make fights with other people and does not want to make trade and all that. Lastly, two things. I think that the Iranian treaty, which is actually what they want to talk about, that's the pinnacle made actually credible for this, and you on its fingers, and Iran is very, very happy about this. So basically, the Iran treaty is the pinnacle of EU foreign policy, and it basically, when you embolden Iran by doing this, it's unlikely that the treaty will be repaired, and that's the most at stake deal ever for you. I think with Turkey deal, this helps Turkey demand and ask for more in relations with EU, which harms the migrants deal, because Turkey is not going to be like, oh, EU like punished Israel, no, but they're going to be like, oh, now we can ask more because they don't have like our relations and all that. Okay, but let's talk about what happens with the European Union. And frame is simple to have such gruesome conversations to achieve a unilateral majority unless the things happen beforehand, right? And then you act. This is how EU foreign policy works. Which means that the motion doesn't assume that countries just get on board, but there's a huge negotiation process, very painful, all of that, in order for them to get to a uniform policy and all that. So there's 4 consequences for this. First, what does reaching a majority mean? It means, as Monica tells you, you compensate on financial budget and harm EU recovery. Netherlands, Austria, and other cheap countries that don't want to spend much on recovery right now will win because they will find it the hardest to sell because of literally Holocaust in their countries that happened, and you will screw over other countries affected by Corona because of that. Like Spain and Italy will get screwed, and the European Union sanctions against the country, and presumably you lift the sanctions only if Israel has and all that, which means that at this time, so lifting the sanctions basically means that you have concessions, that you need to offer concessions to Israel. I'll take a POI, like sorry I lost track of time, but I'll take a POI from opening now. I don't know what time it is.
Giving a little more money to Hungary to rebuild after Corona is much less harmful than empowering Israel to take an atrocious step that is going to escalate the violence and lead to many, many more people.
I disagree, because the package is literally 500 billion euros. That's a lot of money. Also, the deal is like the 7 years EU budget is also on the deal, which means that these are literally billions of euros that we're talking about that are going to be kind of like split accordingly also to this treaty. Lastly, what happens if you don't remove the sanctions, and this is important, you have to support fighting against the annexation. You have to stand behind the Palestinians. And even if you don't do so, this emboldens the Palestinians to think that you will stand behind them, which means that the fighting is harder than what is actually going to happen. Because of all these reasons, we are very proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the speaker for that speech and indeed you all for a fantastic